A lot of lawyers are skeptical about using AI in their day-to-day work because of the risk of hallucination. Well, models are getting smarter, and in general, they are hallucinating less. A lot of what causes hallucinations is actually user dependent. That is, two different people using the exact same AI tool could have wildly different hallucination rates. A lot of those differences in hallucination rates between users using the same model comes down to context management. Put simply, the longer a chat is, the dumber the model's going to get. As you send more and more messages and your chat gets longer and longer, the chances of hallucinations increases gradually until a certain point where it's going to spike dramatically. I'm going to explain how this works at a high level in this video, and hopefully by the end, you're going to have a much better handle on how to manage the context. I promise it's not that hard, and it is going to increase your output results substantially. We're going to be going over some examples, looking at US statutes and some judicial opinions to keep it relevant for attorneys. I'm not a lawyer myself. I've actually never been to law school, but I am the co-founder and CEO of a company called Docket Draft. We work with high volume defense attorneys, and I've done a good bit of legal research myself as part of our marketing and sales. And I have a good background in software engineering. I was a software engineer for over 5 years. I've been using AI tools like Claude Code and OpenAI Codex to write software a lot over the past year. And all of the things I've learned there absolutely apply to context management in legal research as well. The first thing you have to understand about context management is the concept of tokens. Now, you probably heard this term. People talk about token spend and how AI models bill by the token. They don't actually see text like you and I do. Before a text blob gets sent to a large language model, it's going to get broken up into different tokens. And to show you an example, what we're going to do is actually copy the statute. I just went into a random one in the US code here, and we're going to copy and paste this entire block into the OpenAI tokenizer, which is a free tool that's really useful for visualizing this kind of stuff. And if you can, as you can see here, this entire blob of text came out to about 493 tokens. And if we look down here in the actual visualization, you're going to see color codes that actually correspond to the tokens. So what that means is 35, that's a single token. U is a single token. .s is another token, et cetera, et cetera. It's not at all important that you understand the nitty-gritty details of how the model takes raw text and turns it into tokens. You just need to understand that the more words you use, the more tokens you're going to use as well. On average, there's about 4 tokens for every 3 words of English as a very rough rule. Now, if we actually go over to the model spec, this is for GPT 5.5. This is May 2026, so this is likely to change if you're watching this in the future. If we look over here, you're going to see that we have a context window of 1,050,000. And that we can output at most 128,000 tokens. This context window, what that means is your entire chat has a hard cutoff of length of 1,050,000 tokens. So if we go back over to the tokenizer, this was a single part of the US code. Now, granted, it wasn't a particularly long part or section. This took up 493 tokens. So we would be able to put a lot more information in the conversation, and the model would be able to respond. Now, what's important to note is this is a very hard cutoff limit. And what that means is if you have a chat that's using 1,049,999 tokens, the model will be able to output another token. But as soon as you cross over that threshold of 1,050,000, it literally won't even be able to respond. It'll completely crash. Now, 1,050,000 is a lot. And just taking a look at this, you can see that you're able to put a lot of opinions, a lot of statutes, primary sources, that kind of thing. But there is a second limit on the token usage that's important to understand. This is the hard cutoff, but models have what I call a soft cutoff, and it's much, much lower. For GPT 5.5, I would honestly put it somewhere around 200,000 to 300,000 tokens, so 20 to 30% of the advertised context window limit. And this cutoff is different. You are going to be able to continue sending messages and actually chat with the model if you exceed the cutoff. So if your conversation is 250,000 tokens, it's going to have no problem responding to you. But at this point, the intelligence of the model is going to significantly plummet. And you can observe this in practice. If you've had a long conversation with Claude or ChatGPT, and especially if you put a ton of information there, like files, PDFs, that kind of stuff, you'll notice that the messages start to get a lot longer. It starts to get confused about what was actually going on earlier. And this is absolutely going to happen. There's really nothing you can do to prevent this other than just having shorter conversations in general. And it is less about finding that exact limit. Like, it doesn't matter that it's exactly 250,000 tokens or whatever. But in general, you want to be using less tokens. You want to be having smaller conversations. And you really want to keep your limit under 10% as much as possible. Otherwise, your chances of hallucinations are going to significantly skyrocket. And if we go over here, this is the Anthropic model overview. And you're going to notice at the bottom that the context window, at least for Opus 4.7 and Claude 4.6, is 1 million. And Haiku 4.5, you're going to see 200,000. Now, these are just some of the different offerings from Anthropic. But again, the practical limit is much lower. Like, I would want to have all my conversations, especially if it's something important and you're doing some very important legal analysis, you're going to want those conversations much smaller. And that's going to really prevent you from getting into the worst hallucination. And just for another example, I'm on Court Listener, and this is one of the recent opinions I think that was published a few days ago. And if you copy and paste this entire thing, it's going to be much longer than that part of the US code I pasted in. In fact, it's quite long. So let's see what it is. So if we paste that into the tokenizer, that is 14,000 tokens. So that is a lot more than that part of the US code, but it's still well under what the AI will be able to handle. And if you were to just paste this opinion into Claude and have it do an IRAC analysis, which I'm happy to actually do here. If you ask it to IRAC this case like I just did here, the chances are it's going to understand everything. And really, this is just an easy reading comprehension problem for the AI. Now, that being said, if you were to put in a bunch of statutes, 10 different opinions, and your overall token usage was something more like 200,000, and then you pasted that into the chat and asked it to make an analysis, I would bet you a decent amount of money that it was going to make some sort of mistake, some sort of hallucination. So that's what I'm trying to get you to understand, is that the length of the conversation really affects the rate of hallucinations. Now let's talk about PDFs. Now, a lot of what lawyers work with is not just plain text. LLMs can only see text and can see images as well. A lot of times, things that you upload are not going to be raw text. You're not going to be copying and pasting raw text from Court Listener, from Westlaw. You might actually be uploading PDFs of judicial opinions, maybe a complaint or an answer in a case you're working on. Those work a little bit differently. Text is the most efficient. So what that means is this opinion, if we were to upload it as a PDF, I guarantee you would use a lot more than 14,163 tokens. It could even be 10 times more. And the reason for that is when a model reads a PDF, it has to treat each page of the PDF as an image. And even if one of the pages in the PDF just says something like Exhibit B, so it's literally 2 words, it would be maybe 2 or 3 tokens tops. In order for the LLM to actually read that page, if you want the highest accuracy, it's going to treat it like an image. And images use way more tokens. So even though there's 2 words, if it was plain text, it would be about 2 tokens. And we can even just test that here. Exhibit B, that's 3 tokens. If you were to upload a PDF image, that would be hundreds or thousands of tokens for the exact same information. And anyone who's used Claude or ChatGPT, if you've uploaded a lot of PDFs, you'll notice that it's really starting to lose its intelligence quickly. And that's not because you're throwing too much text at it. It's because the images themselves count as if you threw a giant block of text. So be very careful with PDFs. And if you have a giant list of PDFs and you need all of that context, you should try to get that into a text format and use that going forward, because that's much more easy for the AI to understand. And if you think of context as its brain power, a metaphor I've used in the past is health meter. You don't want to let the health meter go to 0. And if you use a PDF, you're making big hits into the health meter. If you convert it to text, the exact same information is much more efficient. And then the LLM doesn't need to waste nearly as much brain power doing the analysis. It doesn't need to figure out what the words are in the image and then do legal analysis. It just sees the words and is able to go straight to the analysis, which is going to preserve its brain power. That's pretty much it for the basics. The longer your chats are, the worse performance you're going to get. PDFs, be very careful with them. Try to pull out text you can use and copy and paste into new chats. Start new chats often. That is really going to help you. And be very skeptical of the advertised context limits. This 1,050,000 limit, if you're anywhere near that usage, the amount of hallucinations you're going to see is going to be crazy. But just knowing that this threshold exists and knowing that starting new chats, preferring plain text where possible, and being careful about the amount of content you're pasting into your chats should make your performance of these models a lot higher, and your effective hallucination rate should plummet.